So in this Sikha, it's a Sikha in Chelik Chaf Aleph, if I remember correctly, and this is amazing the way the Rebbe takes a Rashi, even though already from the Rashi we see the concept of the sensitivity for another Yid. The Chagav today is also Chav Beit Shvat, and we know about the Rebbetzins being sensitive and care about another Yid. Maybe we'll mention it later. And he brings it out to an even more powerful way than, of course, reading the Rashi in a simple sense. Now, of course, it's like a standard Rashi Sikha, and the Rebbe compares the Lashon of Rashi and the way the same idea of Rashi is brought down in other places, in the Mechilta, and the Chiddush, or the difference, why Rashi says it the way he says it, and not the way it says in the Mechilta. But then, from the way Rashi expresses it, it comes out also still a very powerful idea in Avos Yisrael and caring about another Yid. B'si in Parshas Seinu al pasuk v'leisala b'mailas hamizbechi asher lo yisigola ervascha olav. The simple meaning is that when a person walks up the steps, so then their footsteps are wide, so it's called a gilui erva. So isa b'mechilta v'ari dvarim kal v'chomer ma avonim shein bandas loy l'ra v'loy l'toivam amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu l'sinig b'aminig Bizoyon. So if, when it comes to rocks, they don't have any brain, is it not a kal v'chomer? So for sure, that when you're treating another person, you should make sure not to do anything that's called a minhag bizoyon. Later on, there's going to be very much, the Rebbe is going to be medayik in the word minhag bizoyon. It's not really a bizoyon, it's just minhag bizoyon. Kal v'chomer zeh huva gam b'pirish Rashi. Aval b'shinuyim v'hisafis. Uma v'anamal lolu shein b'mdas lahakpid al bizoyon. So the Mechilta said shein b'mdas loy l'ra v'loy l'toiva. Rashi says shein b'mdas lahakpid al bizoyon. Amra Torah hoyel v'yesh b'm tzorech. A lot of the Sikh is going to focus on this. Hoyel v'yesh b'm tzorech. The Mechilta doesn't say anything about Hoyel sheyesh b'm tzorech. Rashi adds these words, and the Rebbe is going to emphasize and explain what's the meaning of these words and why Rashi has to add it. Loy tinag behem minig bizoyon chaverach shu b'dmus yotzrach, not b'dmus shel misham r'vaya olam, but it says b'dmus yotzrach umakpid al bizoyonai. That's another thing that the Mechilta doesn't say. The Mechilta doesn't say umakpid al bizoyonai al achas kama v'kama. So the Rebbe is going to explain certain things. It's obvious why Rashi changes from the Lashon to the Mechilta. But other things the Rebbe is going to try to explain more barichs. That first change, the first change that we see between Rashi and the Mechilta, moving by pashtus, ki aidei had goshas heder habizoyon. Ba'avonim benigud lebizoyin sheyashne b'chavercha. That is the emphasis over here, that we're saying that by when it comes to stones, there is no hakpoda on bizyonim. Muzbe kal v'chomer zebepashtus will be yaser says. This kal v'chomer now, the way Rashi puts it, is much more stronger. Umahai taima gam hoisif Rashi legabe chaverchas atevas umakpid al bizyoinoi the lasa b'mechilta. In other words, what Rashi is doing is he's emphasizing it even more, how much of a kal v'chomer it is, how we have to be careful with another person. In the lashon of the Mechilta that just says ein bem das lo l'rav lo l'toiva, it's not as powerful as saying ein bem das l'hakpid al bizyoinam, because that's more of a contrast. Avonim are not makpid al bizyoinam, and a person is makpid al bizyoinam. Then just saying they have das, they don't have das. It's a lot stronger. Later on in the Sikha, we're going to see even more how much that is important concerning the idea of minig bizoyon and the concept of bizoyon, etc. In other words, Bizoyon has to do with the concept of das. If a person is not in a state of awareness to know about it, then the whole idea of Bizoyon doesn't really apply. Like it says that someone that's asleep, he's going to bring this later on in the Sikha, someone's asleep. Or a person, a body of someone that's passed away. Al Pidin, there's no dinim of Bizoyon. Yes, there is other halachs about it, but in general, the concept of mevayish, to be mevayish someone is not applicable. There's no dinei boishes when it comes to that. V'chein Allah shema pirish Rashi. Chaver choshu b'dmus yotzrach b'makim lashna mechilta b'dmusi shel misha amar v'haya olam. So again, that makes it much more powerful. He lefisha kavanas habita yotzarcha he kipashut leyotzrei shala oila b'mailos. When it says the one that said and created the world, so that's just a very general thing. But here we're talking about Yitzrach, the one that created you that are going up these steps, and you that are not caring for Bizoyon. So he formed you. So how much do you have to care about someone that is in the image, that's bidmus of the person that formed you? So again, that Rashi's way of switching around the words makes the Kal V'chomer much more powerful than Mechilta. Which doesn't say anything like it in the Mechilta. Ma moisif kan hatzoidach sheyesh ba'avonim ba'azvoras hakal v'chomer nimud mem al chavercha. In a way, you could even say that maybe it's even taking away from it. But what does it make a difference? You need it. You need them. You don't need the avonim. The main thing is that the Torah told you the avonim don't have any appreciation and don't get embarrassed, and your friend does get embarrassed. What's it make a difference that these avonim are needed? And if the avonim were not needed, if they're only decorative, how does that help or take away from the Kal V'chomer? Why do we need to bring it in? So here the Rebbe is first of all going to establish it's not just that Rashi has a stronger Kal V'chomer, but the Mechilta's approach is a different type of approach than the approach of Rashi. And to be able to understand it, we need to see what the Mechilta says just right before what we brought in the Mechilta. Before the part that we quoted, Asher loy sigola ervoscha alav. Why does it say in the pasuk alav? Don't use steps to go up on the Mizbe'ach. Shaloy sigola ervoscha. Stop. Why the word alav has to be added? Alav iyata peseya. Avlata peseya pseya gasa behechel b'kodesh hakadoshim. Even though you might think the same svara, you don't want to go in such a type of step anywhere in the Beis Hamikdash. Seemingly, yeah. Shahaya bedin, and he says even more so. It's great, like you're saying, it's greater. It's a Kal V'chomer. Umay Mizbe'ach hakal asur l'fsoya b'psiya. Mizbe'ach has a less of a kedusha of the kodesh hakadoshim in the heichel, because the Mizbe'ach is outside in the azara. Ha'heichel v'kodesh hakadoshim hachamurim dinu sha'asur l'fsoya psiya gasa b'hen l'vishay chamurim. You would think that's a Kal V'chomer, that you shouldn't be allowed in the kodesh hakadoshim and the heichel also not to walk in such a type of way. Talmud loymar asher loy sigol arvoscha olav. This is a din by the Mizbe'ach. Boy iyata peseya psiya yesera, avlata peseya psiya yesera behechel b'kodesh hakadoshim, umamshich b'mechilta sham ba'avos hakal v'chomer anal l'mayim avonim. After saying this halacha and telling us that there's a difference, the Torah is mamaik. We don't know why, but the Torah makes a difference between the kodesh hakadoshim, the heichel, and the steps on the Mizbe'ach. So then he goes on and says, Ma avonim that have no das l'rol l'toiva. Still in all, we're makbid on them. How much more so a person that was created in the dmus of Mishamar v'hayoyel. Ava Rashi betchilas pirushay bevoy lahasberes hakosov pirush kid lahalon. The beginning of Rashi, the way that Rashi starts, he doesn't start in the way that the Mechilta starts. But he says, "Shayidei hamaylois atatzarach laharchiv psiyei secha," and then Rashi right away says, "Va'af al pi she'eina gili erva mamish hariksiv aslem michnasei vad mikol makim harchavas hapsiyos karev legili ervahu va'atanoyeg behem min hag Bizoyon." We'll talk about this soon. Hine havas akal v'chaymer anal b'mechiltam take v'lacher amut. Olav v'yat b'seh p'siyah gasa avlat b'seh chulu b'heichel b'kodesh hakadoshim. Yes, in other words, why does the Mechilta make one, says one right after the other? Yes, loymar shi lefi b'shvekach miyusheves kushya halulu l'yisoyder. The Mechilta is trying to forewarn a question that comes up. L'chura ha'isur lo'segal ervas cha'alav lo'sinig b'hem minig Bizoyon einay machmas avnei ha-Mizbe'ach mitzad atzmam ela mepnei shebi yoysam chelik ma-Mizbe'ach v'ha-migdosh harei ze inyan shel kedushas v'yiras ha-Mizbe'ach ha-kosher l'chvoid Hashem ha-shoyer al-Mizbe'ach v'ha-migdosh. Let's skip the brackets. We'll get back to the brackets in a minute. Top of the second column. Vim kain eich efsher lilmoid kal v'choymer me'avonim al chavercha b'shah she'ba'avonim yesh kedusha she'ein b'chavercha. The whole point of the limud is he's using bedin. Yesh bedin is an expression in the Gemara that means a kal v'choymer. We're trying to say stones don't care. A person cares. Stones have no das. A person has das. A person was formed with mus mishamar v'hayoyel. So, but what type of kal v'chomer is it? If it's not about the stones, it's about the derech eretz that we're supposed to have for the Mikdash. The Mikdash and the Mizbe'ach, these are holy places, and that's why lo segol ervas cha'olav. So to prevent that question, that's why the Mechilta first says this is not an Isser in the whole Beis HaMikdash. This is not an Isser in the Kodesh HaKadoshim or the Heichel. This is only on the Mizbe'ach. So you see that it's not about the Kedusha part, because if it was because of the Kedusha part, so just like you can't have Minig Bizoyon on the Mizbe'ach, so you shouldn't be able to have the Minig Bizoyon in the Heichel and the Kodesh HaKadoshim. So that's why he starts off with telling you that the Mizbe'ach is different than the Heichel and the Kodesh HaKadoshim, because then you'll understand the Kal V'chomer. Olam Kiv. Let's read inside 1 second. Olam Kiv Shalamadnu Koidem L'chein. Ma hakos min hakosov ki olav iata peseya psia gasa avlata peseya psia gasa behechol bekodesh kadoshim. Skip over the brackets again to the next page. Nimtza muvan sha iser v'loy sala goymer hu loy rak b'shel yoysej amizbeach chelik ma'amigdash ki im beikir mitzad avnei amizbeach atzmam. It's not a Kedusha thing, or not only a Kedusha thing. Umemela efsher lilmid mekan kal v'chomer. Umayim avonim shein bem das loy derov loy l'toiv amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu lifsinik bem ba'avonim gufa minig Bizoyon chavercha cholo dinu shlo lifsinik bem minig Bizoyon. What were we going to ask? By the way, it could be that what you're going to ask is going to be talking about in the brackets. So the first brackets that we skipped is on the bottom of the first column on the previous page. And the Rebbe says over there concerning this idea of Yiras HaMizbe'ach, that Yiras HaMizbe'ach is just one of the dinim of Yiras HaMikdash. You have to have respect, and there are certain things that we don't do in the Beis HaMikdash. Val derech mitzvahs moedem in migdash b'chlal. Why do we have a mitzvah that we have to respect the Beis HaMikdash? Says the Rambam, Asher loy min HaMikdash ata yorei elam emishishochin shchinasu makmazeh. In other words, it has to do with the kedusha of the place. So you might think that when it comes to the Mizbe'ach, it's not has nothing to do with the das or not the das. It has to do with the kedusha. The kedusha of the place is definitely not something that applies by a person. So you can't make a kal v'chomer. Ubalash nachinuch shemitzvah zu hi likvoya benafsheseinu yiras hamakim baruchu v'chashivusoi v'al kein huz harnu shaloi linig sham kalas roish v'shum minyan. So if that's the case, so you can't bring a kal v'chomer. So that's why you have to show, no. It has nothing to do with the Kedushas HaMikdash, because this is something that's allowed in other places in the Beis HaMikdash. It's only by the Mizbe'ach. It's something unique by the Mizbe'ach. And he says, Varei, the second brackets we skipped, in the second column on the previous page, Varei, Lefi Aksol Kadai Techanal, Shadavar Kashal Kvoid HaMikdash, if it would have been because of the reason you're not allowed to step Siyah Gas on Mizbe'ach is because it's the Kedusha, the Beis HaMikdash. Hoya Isur Shab Siyah Gas Tzarech Lochul Af Behechel B'Kodesh HaKadoshim V'Adrabe B'Yaser Seis B'Kolshkim V'Kal V'Chomer Liyasim Chamurim K'Dushas Mizbe'ach. We were saying before that the holiness of the Heichel and the Kodesh HaKadoshim is even holier than the Mizbe'ach. So therefore, we must say that the reason for the mitzvah loisigola ervascha love has nothing to do with kedusha. Because if it would be because of kedusha, then you'd never be able to learn out about a person. A person does not have the kedusha of a heichel. The person does not have a kedusha of the kodesh hakedoshim, and a person does not have a kedusha like the Mizbe'ach. But once you know that even holier things in the Mizbe'ach, like the heichel and the kodesh hakedoshim, you're still allowed to have this type of psiya gasa, so you know that this doesn't have to do with kedusha. If it doesn't have to do with kedusha, so therefore now the mechilta can say, if stones that have no das l'ro l'toiva, you have to act in a respectful manner towards them. Kal v'chomer when it comes to a person. Yes, what do you want to ask?
Usually, when you bring a mute, Allah. It means that even if it's higher kedusha, that the mute is saying that it's only on the Mizbe'ach, let's say.
Right.
So who said that it's not because of kedusha? It's because of kedusha, and even if it's because of kedusha, therefore the pasuk needs to add the word Allah here.
The pshat, why you have to say Allah, is because you would think that the Kedusha, if it was because of Kedusha, then it would be koil everything else. If there was no havamin of Kedusha, so then you wouldn't have to say Allah. Because it says it here, why should you apply it somewhere else? Once you have a svara to make a binyan av, to compare the two, say, this is holy and that's even holier, so therefore let's apply it over there also. So you need to have a pasuk to tell you, no, we don't apply that kal v'chomer. Once we say we don't apply that kal v'chomer, so we already are lost. We don't know what's the reason. We don't know if it's kedusha. We don't know if it's something else. If we know that it's a klal in kedusha, so then you can't learn out concerning a person. But once you have the miyut, you're right. It could be that maybe it is a kedusha thing, but it's not something that's going to undermine the kal v'chomer against a person. We're not going to say now that how can you say a raya for a person? It could be the kedusha of the Mizbe'ach. No, you could slug that up because you're saying if it's kedusha, so kedusha should apply also by the kodesh hakedoshim. Kedusha should apply by the heichel as well. In other words, perhaps you could even put it even more so. It's the very same pasuk, the very same pasuk that tells you that your loisigola ervascha tells you that it doesn't apply by the heichel and the kodesh hakedoshim. Olav. The fact that it's the very same limud, the very same pasuk shows that it's not because of what they have in common. because then it makes no sense that that very same pasuk is going to be memayit from something that's similar or even stronger. I hear what you're trying to say, but I think that when the pasuk is memayited, especially in the very same place that we're trying to learn out this limud, it's trying to tell you it's not a kedusha thing. Ois gim. Based on what we now said about the mechilta, that what the mechilta is saying is a continuation of what he said before, about that it's only on the Mizbe'ach, not on the Heichel and the Kodesh HaKadoshim. So according to this, Yuvan Gamatam lo Yisafas Rashi bePirushay Amra Toira Hoyel v'Yeshvam Tzoyrach Loi Tinag B'Hem Minag Bizoyon. That the idea of Tzoyrach is what makes you not do a Minag Bizoyon. That we asked before, Mechilta doesn't say anything like that. And seemingly, what is the tzoyrech? The fact you need the stones, and if you wouldn't need the stones, so what? Not like the Mechilta, he leaves out that whole part of the Mechilta. Rashi had to explain this concept of what makes the Mizbe'ach something that's loisigol vascha olav as part of the Kal V'chomer. In the Kal V'chomer itself, he inserts Hoyel v'yesh b'hem tzoydach. Hoyel v'yesh b'hem tzoydach. Pirush, kivin sheba'avonim alolu, avnei Mizbe'ach. Yesh inyan miyuchad yesh b'hem tzoydach, which will not apply by the Heichel and Kodesh HaKadoshim, as we'll say later on. It's going to take a while till the Rebbe explains what the yesh b'hem tzoydach is. Shehu hagoyrem es ha'isur shel lo yisala b'mailos asher lo yisigola voscha olav. Isur al avnei Mizbe'ach kishal ha'atzmam loy mipas hiyoysim chelik miklolos ha'migdosh ela hoyel v'yesh b'hem tzoydach. I know it's a little bit confusing until you see what the Rebbe says later on. But the main point is over here, there is something unique that's by the Avnei HaMizbeach, not Kedusha, because Rashi knows this din also, that even though he doesn't bring it down, but the Heichel and Kodesh HaKadoshim, it doesn't apply. But there's a different reason why we learn out this idea of Minhag Bizoyon, and that is because there is a tzoyrech in these avonim. Again, what that means, we'll soon see.
It's the same idea, like the mechilta. Just the mechilta it brings from the
olav, right? And Rashi uses the yeshlam tzoyrech to show that it's not the kedusha component, but it's something else, right? Val pizem moving bepashtos mashloi matzinu kol iser livnes milos. B'shar chelkei hamigdash, afal pishay deza tegolar voscha. By Rashi saying that, we can see also many places in the Beis Hamikdash you're allowed to build steps, and there actually were steps. There were different steps between different sections, and there's no iser. Va'adraba hoyu boy milas shebehen hoyu oilim leulam laheichal. The different sections of the Beis Hamikdash had steps in between. So what's the difference? Shekain ala avonim shebamailas elu loy nitan loymar sheyesh bam tzoyrach k'moikan. And that's why you can't be noyeg in the Minhag Bizoyon. The other steps, it's ein behem tzoyrach, or you're not going to use the term yesh bam tzoyrach, as the Rebbe will explain. And that's why those stones you're allowed to walk on. Those steps you're allowed to use. And those steps we do make. Steps by the Mizbe'ach, yesh b'hem tzoydach, we can't use. Va'abir b'zeh. Halimud ma'avnei Mizbe'ach sh'asa levaz ben Yisrael acher. The lechura tamua. First of all, the Rebbe is now establishing what I started saying before. We're not talking about an open halachic case of Bizoyon. That's not what Rashi is talking about. V'chiyesh tzoydach li'zdakik l'kal v'chomer me'avnei Mizbe'ach l'shem kach. So that's not the point that Rashi is saying. ומפני שכאן באבני מזבח אין המדובר בביזוין כפשוטי. כי אם בלושן המחילתא ורש"י במנהג ביזוין בלבד. Hein מצד העוונים, it's only a minhag bizoyin. Why? Because the stones don't know what's going on. Shein bem hergish or bizoyin. And we know that hergish is a key part of what makes a bizoyin a bizoyin. Vari hergish a bizoyin hu inyan ikri bizoyin. V'ad shal libe des svarachs begemara kol chiyuv tashlumi boishes hu davke b'makom sheyesh kisufa only when there can be embarrassment. Aval in bichu yoshein v'meis. It's not, everybody doesn't agree with it, but we see such a svara that boishes applies by someone that has a mind to know it. The person asleep or the person that passed away. Therefore, I'm a vayish potter. Let's look at the action itself. What did he do? There's a din in the Beis HaMikdash. You can't act in a kalus roish type of way, just like in a shul, or you're not allowed to act in the way of kalus roish. Ki kalus roish u bezoyin mamish asurin b'chol shetach hamishkan v'hamikdash. You're not allowed to go in with your walking stick. You're not allowed to go in with your money belt or different types of things. And for sure, you're not allowed to go in like laughing and joking and whatever. Different things of kalus roish you don't do in the makom hamikdash. So, obviously, the problem here of Isgolar Vascha Olav is not talking about something that's both from the perspective of the person, Kalas Roish, and from the perspective of the stones of Bizoyon. Ella, Hanidin Kan, hu minhag Bizoyon belvad, Maisa sha'olu lihisparish ki inyan shal Bizoyon. Ukedivrei Rashi, she'etzel ha'oyle b'mailas ha'omer kan, ein gilui erva mamish, ela rak korov legilui erva. That's why Rashi explains. They were wearing mechnasayim. So therefore, if it was bitaka gilui erva, so yeah, that would be a case of bizoyin. It's all, they're wearing mechnasayim. If they're wearing mechnasayim, it's only korov legilui erva. That means it's only a minhag bizoyin. So that is the chiddush that Rashi is trying to tell you. We're not learning from this story. We're not learning from this halacha that you're not allowed to be mevayish someone else. You're not allowed to be mevazah someone else. That's not what we need to have this limud for. Umikan lemeidim l'gab chaveirei she'aser lasas ma'aseh shu minhag bezoyin belvad va'afilu kasher Allah eina margish aydei kach shum busha bezoyin. Even though, al pi halacha, or according to one opinion, there's no payment involved, and there's no dinim of boishes and so on, it's just like we learn out that if you're made in yad al chaveri, it's also to be made in yad al chaveri from the story in Parshas Shmois with Dasan and Aviram. But still, when it comes to Bezdin, I don't think that there's a charge, according to halacha, that Bezdin is going to charge someone if he didn't actually hit him. There's no actual nezek, ripui, sar, sheves, boishes. There's not going to be any payment plan for that. There's not going to be any damages that are paid. The same thing, take, if there's something that's no real bizoyin, there's no dinim of boishes, and there's no payment involved. But from this pasuk we learn out that even though there's no payment for boishes, it's still called minhag bizoyin, and a person should not act that way towards chaveroi. Be'inyan zem, hu achiluk shebein ha'mechilta lepirish Rashi mahu nikudasei shel ha'isur. L'das ha'mechilta toichen ha'isur hu bepulas ha'adam she'asur afilu lasis ma'aseh she'einoi ma'aseh bezoyin elu minhag bezoyin belvad. That's the main point of the mechilta. If it's an action that's minhag bezoyin, the mechilta says you're not allowed to do that to another person. Ilu Rashi derech hapshat eina yochel lefarish kein, because in pshat then you're not going to be able to understand the difference between Mizbe'ach and the Heichel and Kodesh Kadoshim. Ki lefi zeh ein tam lechalik bein avnei Mizbe'ach leavnei Heichel. Umezeh shei iser hu beavnei Mizbe'ach davke Muvan shemetzad pulas ha'adam ki shala'atzma loy hoysa ha'toyra hiseres hoys kivim shaloy hoya kamaitza bezoyin amiti. So therefore, it must be something else, another ingredient involved. And that's why Rashi brings in yesh bahem tzoyrich. El sheba'avnei Mizbe'ach yesh inyan miyuchad hoyil v'yesh bahem tzoyrich asher machmosoi goyre minig bizoyon ze leme'ein kisufa etzel elu shetzrichim la'avonim halalu k'lekamon u'memela hadavar asur. It causes an embarrassment. And who's the embarrassment? Look at the words. The embarrassment is when I step on the stones in an embarrassing way, and then the Kohanim have to use these stones. That's the embarrassment. That's the kisufa. That's the Bizoyon. It's not the Bizoyon of the stones, because if it would be the Bizoyon of the stones, what's the difference between the stones on the Mizbe'ach or the stones in the Heichel and the Kodesh HaKadoshim? Therefore, Rashi has to say it's the Bizoyon that's like for those that need the stones. Let's see in the next page. V'hezber. That's what it means yesh b'm tzoydach. Vav. V'hezber b'zeh. B'mesh ha'kasav Rashi hoil v'yesh b'm tzoydach kavanose loymar sha'koyanim einam yecholim lasis avedosam ala Mizbe'ach elai de tipusam v'aliyosam ala avonim. וזהו הטעם שלו יתינק בהם מנהג ביזוין לפי שכאשר אדם נוהג מנהג ביזוין בקשר לאבני המזבח הרי הוא מבזה בדרך ממילא את הכוהנים הזקוקים וצריכים לעוונים אלו. Then the Rebbe in Ha'ara 28 says you could broaden it and say it's not just the Kohanim that need it. The truth is the Mizbe'ach is something that makes shalom between Yidden and Avim Shebashamayim. It's Meirich Yom of Shalodom. So really, the Tzoyrich is not just the Kohanim Tzoyrich. It's the entire Klal Yisrael. So here you're taking something that's necessary, that's a Tzoyrich for Klal Yisrael, and you're acting towards it in a minhag bizoyin. Ubedugmas, avaloi b'shava mamish, mashakosva rishonim l'gabe chiyuv tashlumim shel boishes. Again, going back to the topic that we had before, that there's 5 types of tashlumim, 5 types of damages that a person pays to another if he damages him. There's nezek, ripui, tsar, sheves, boishes. The time that he was unemployed, the time, the suffering that he had, the healing, the doctor's bills, etc. And one of the 5 types of damages is for embarrassment, unless the person was asleep and there's no embarrassment, for example. Shadin, according to one opinion, Shadin, Rokak bebigdoi potter, there's a din, it's brought down. If a person spits on someone, it's called boishes. So there might not be nezek tzar ripui, but you still have to pay him boishes. You still have to pay him for embarrassment. But when is spitting on his clothes considered something that you have to pay the boishes for? Hu davke im hamizbayish loy lovash es habeged b'shas ma'isa. Avol im hoya lovash boisa shah beis harekika beged zeh chayev aroikik. Why? The Rebbe says it's not exactly the same, but it's similar. The point is, the fact that he's using it makes it something that's more connected with him, and therefore the boishes applies by extension to the person, and you call that you were embarrassing the person. The same thing, the Avnei Mizbe'ach. So now the Rebbe says in the brackets, but what about the other steps in the Beis HaMikdash? There were the steps that went up into the Heichel. What about those steps? The Rebbe explains. Why? Why on the Mizbe'ach was there a tzorich, and the Avonim going into the Heichel there was no tzorich? V'tam hadavar. Aleph, ki efsher la'agia la'heichel gam shelo ya'idei mailas. That it's possible to get around in a different way. You don't need, I'm not sure exactly.
It was higher.
It was higher, but perhaps there's a way of climbing into it or going from the side. Maybe it's possible because you can go in from the side, not from the main doors. So that's most probably what it means. That you can go around from the side, and therefore you don't have to take the steps. That's one idea why it's ein bem tzorech. Beis umaylos elu loyhayu lifnei hahechel shebay nasa avoda el lifnei ha'ulam. So it wasn't a tzorech for the Kohanim to be able to do the avoda. Umemela nimtza shalichas hakoyanim lahechel idea maylos shelifnei ha'ulam eina chelik v'tzorech b'avidasam b'hechel. It has the din of the Mizbe'ach itself. Doesn't say it's considered when you're stepping on the steps, it's considered al Mizbe'ach. Olav means olav on the Mizbe'ach. So that's mamish part of what the avodah of the Kohanim is necessary for him to be able to do the avodah on Mizbe'ach. He has to go on these steps. So now, once Rashi introduces this idea that it has to do with the tzorech of the Kohanim, that the Kohanim need to have these ways of going up, and a person that walks on them in a way that's korev legilui erva, so then it's coming out that he's bringing a bizoyon to the koyanim that need the steps. Kiven shu bedmus yitzarcha nimtza sham minik bizoyon klape chaveroi yesh inyan shal bizoyon klapes yitzarcha, that it's as if you are embarrassing the Eibishter, or at least you're acting in a minik bizoyon towards the Eibishter, because the kohen who's going up on the milos is bedmus yitzarcha, or not the kohen, but the person that you're embarrassing is bedmus yitzarcha. Bedugmas is loy sala, b'maylos hamizbe'ach yishim minik bizoyon, hanasa b'kesher lavonim goyrer bizoyon. Must probably should say goyrem. It's probably a printing mistake. Goyrem bizoyon lekehanim. Al pizeh tuvan gam lashon Rashi ba'aviyas akal v'choymer ma'avonim alolum she'ein b'em das lahakpid al bizoyonim. That we said the Mechilta doesn't use that lashon. The Mechilta uses she'ein ben das l'ra oy l'toiva. Rashi uses the term lahakpid al bizoyonim. Amra toira hoyel v'yachem tzoyrech leitinik v'minik bizoyon chaver choshabed mus yitzarcha makpid al bizoyonoi alachas kama v'kama v'loik v'mechilta shesham les alosh lahakpid al bizoyonim umakpid al bizoyonim. This is the two differences. Another that's in Rashi and the Mechilta. Ki bekach barashi lahasberes hadvarim kilahalon. Uma im bavonim halalu she'ein behem das lahakpid. Umemela ein behem klal ha'ikir hageder shel bizoyon. Shari mitrein makpid al bizoyon loy nizbaze. There's also a similar din. The Rebbe doesn't bring it here, but it says that hakol lefyam mevayish v'mizbayish. And therefore, a cotton doesn't become as embarrassed by certain things as when you do something to a gadol. And then there's a cotton she'ein by das b'chlal, that the whole idea of busha doesn't apply by a cotton. So therefore, if there's no busha by him, so because he's not makbid on it, there's no bizoyin. V'afal pikein. So here you have an interesting thing. Stones are no better than a cotton, right? Stones have no akpada. But why are we worried about the stones? That's why it's considered minik bizoyon, even though they themselves have no das, even though they themselves are not makbid. So if it's that way concerning stones, Allah, first of all, should mus yitzarcha. Hainu shaychachusim yitzarcha yishira v'nikeres v'shaloi ka'avne Mizbe'ach v'akoyanim she'en benem shayches b'dmusam. The connection, you're saying, the stones have a tzorich for the koyanim. So by my embarrassing the stones, I'm embarrassing the koyanim. But it's a lot farther away between the stones that I'm embarrassing and the koyanim. Mashenkin, a person that was b'dmus shel ma'ila, that was made b'tzelem elokim masas adam, there's a lot closer connection between a person and the Eibishter. So for sure, kal v'chomer, how much we have to be careful with a minhag bizoyon. Beis, another thing about a person is, umakpid al bizoyonim, umemele af mitzad chaver chaguf et itachen kam mitzias shal bizoyon, mashenkin bavne Mizbe'ach shesham in klal bizoyon mitzad avonim atzmam. So this is the 2 points that the Rashi is being madgish to give it the kal v'chomer. How much stronger and how much more so it is when you're dealing with a person. Now the Rebbe is going to bring this in according to Yeina Shel Torah. Pirush Rashi al Torah Arem Yeina Shel Torah. The Rebbe brings this, I think, originally from the Shalah. V'yashloim asher Pirush Rashi zeh shebesiyum haparsha v'akoil hoylach achra chitum merumazim ikra v'toichna shel klolos haparsha inyan matan Torah aseres hadibros. This parsha is a super powerful parsha. It's the Aseres HaDibros. This is the end of our parsha. You could think it's like, okay, it's Hakleinika, it's a small thing. Okay, yeah, we're talking about this idea about you should behave nicely towards your friend. So the Rebbe says, the fact that it's the end of the parsha of the Aseres HaDibros, this is a powerful thing. This is like bringing home the message of the Aseres HaDibros. Kishem sheba'aseres hadibros nichlu lo rak hadibros anoichi havayla kechav lo yilacham hanyon manaylam b'yoyser b'achas Hashem elagam hadibros ha'achroinim shem dvarim pshutim v'af hanyon ha'pshutim b'yoyser shmerodim l'chaveiroi lo yisirtzach lo yisirnaf kol shel yiracha. All these things are very obvious. It's simple things. A person with a brain in their head knows not to do. So kein hu gam b'pirish Rashi Torah shebal peh shesoifa shel parshas Yisroi oisek ben chitzusa shel azihirus betachlis ben yonim pshutim shel anhogis ben adam l'chaveiroi va'ad lezihirus afilu mipnei minhag bizoyon. Just like the Aseres HaDibros goes into the most simple things, Rashi at the end of our parsha goes into the most simple things, even something that just not even a bizoyon but a minhag bizoyon. Ukeshem shadvarim apshutim shebasares hadibros einu metzias nefredes min hadibros harishonim elok mevur bekam mekaymes hatam shemekayim shel dvarim elu nikvu basares hadibros. Why were such simple things like lo sirtzach, lo signov, and so on placed in Aseres HaDibros? Is gam kedei lamdeinu sheheim ve'anoichi havayla kecha yenechad heimo. There is no separation between the two, between the first dibros and the last dibros. La mitoy shel davar gam hadvarim shemen adam l'chaveiroi heim bein adam l'makim v'yesh lizoir behem mishum shezeh ratzon Hashem. The reason why I don't steal should not be only because it makes sense to me that I don't steal, but primarily it should be because anoichi havai lekecha, because this is one of the things that Hashem told me not to do. Kach gam binyaneinu moisef Rashi oid shazihirus klape chavercha hi mipnei shu b'dmus yotzercha. Not stam. Okay, we have to respect everybody. We have to have Avos Yisrael and so on. We have to have the underlying meaning of Avos Yisrael because every person is b'tzelem dmus shel ma'ila. Sheichusei shel iser zeh lebein adam lemakim eina rak mitzad hatzivi shebedavar hainu sheyesh lizor binyanim el mitzad tzivi Hashem. That why do I have Avos Yisrael? Why do I not do a minhag bizoyon? Because Hashem told me not to do it. More than that. Elagam lefi shechavercha v'amakim baruchu hem b'dmus achas k'viyachu ulefichach I azihirus b'kavod chavercha Nechsheves ki izi hiras bekavod HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I mentioned the story before, that once by Fabrengen, the Rebbe saw someone was like pushing someone else to wake him up. The guy fell asleep in the middle of Fabrengen, and the Rebbe a lot of times used to joke about the people that are falling asleep in the middle of Fabrengen. So this guy had sich untergenommen from the Rebbe's covered. He was like, taking the Rebbe's honor to heart. So he pushed him a little bit to wake him up. And the Rebbe didn't like it. And the Rebbe said something like, Stuppen, anander chelik al kamemal. You push a chelik al kamemal? This is the same thing he's saying. The reason why I have to be nizar bekavod chavercha is because he is connected with the Eibishter. He's been mushal ma'ila. And that's the kavod of the Eibishter. Und bei Ruben mit der Teuve der Rebbe concludes, Sha'avas Yisrael, ad lava bilti mugbelis, ha-mevila de ha-noget shel kibut chavercha betachlis ha-zehirus, ha-rei b'pnimiyusa, inyan shel avas ha-kadosh baruch hu v'kavod shamayim, when I love another Yid in the ultimate way. U'kemayim aponim leponim, ha-dover megales avas ha-kadosh baruch hu Yisrael. When we show our love for Hashem, by a love for another Yid, so then, like the waters reflect back to me, the same face, so the Eibishter reflects back to me his love for the Yid. That just like I am careful about the covet of another Yid, so Hashem is elevating the covet of the Yid in the eyes of all the nations. ועד לכבוד האמיתי שיהיה בגילוי, בגאולה המצווה השלמה, דהמשך צדקנו ומהרו ממנו ממש.